hiking day trips that we're planning this summer around North Dakota. And I think you're going to be really excited and surprised by some of the great locations we've chosen, and just some of the wonderful parks that we're going to. I think you'll really enjoy it. So we're going to get to that in just a little bit. But one of the 6 pillars of brain health, according to the Global Council on Brain Health, is exercise. And hiking is just a wonderful and great way to be active and to get out in nature, as Bob said, to get that fresh air. It feels so good to finally have some nice weather. I know parts of our state are getting some snow yet today, but eventually it will all melt and we'll be out on those trails and hiking around our wonderful state. So we're going to hit some new parks this year and go back to one that we went to last year too. So you'll hear more in just a little bit. Also want to remind you to please consult your doctor prior to starting any new exercise regimen. Really important to make sure that you're ready for that. And so do please check with your doctor on that. I want you to note the Zoom features, including the Q&A, where that you can use to ask your questions. We're going to have the chat is not working. I'm sorry for all the participants. It is for panelists, but for participants, please just use the Q&A and pop in there anything that you want to know about during the program, and then we'll address as many of those questions as we can along the way with Josh Steffan. So I also want to remind you that this program is being recorded and will be available on our youtube.com/AARPND channel afterwards. And I know we had lots of registrants and a lot of people look forward to getting that link afterwards to be able to watch it at their convenience. So we appreciate you registering, and we'll always make sure you get that link, and you can always find them on YouTube too. But that is how that works. So lastly, big thanks again to our volunteer greeter, Bob Entringer from Bismarck. And if you'd like to join our group of volunteers and help us with our events, whether they be virtual or in person, we encourage you to do that, going to aarp.org/I-want-to-volunteer. And we'll show you that a little bit later and give you that on the slide toward the end so you can take that down. But we'd love to have you join us. We're doing lots of fun things out there. So now it is my pleasure to welcome Josh Steffan from the North Dakota Parks and Recreation Department. Welcome, Josh, and thanks again for joining us today. I know we did this last year and kind of did a little hiking preview, but this year we have so much more to tell everyone about. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about you, Josh, and what you do for the department?
Sure. So thanks, Doreen, for having me again for the second year. And hi, everyone. Kind of returning for the second year, I guess. And, a little bit of background on me. So I grew up in the southwestern corner of the state, about 15 miles from THEODORE Roosevelt National Park. I've been with North Dakota Parks and Recreation for almost 2 years now, just under 2 years, and have really seen a lot of different places that I didn't growing up, in the southwest corner. And so I'm really excited that you guys are kind of continuing this a second year, kind of expanding to see some different parks as well as returning to see some favorites. And I'm going to spend the next, I guess, about half hour or so with you guys, just kind of showcasing the places you're going to and kind of talking about North Dakota Parks and Recreation in general and what we do, what's our mission, and how we're able to basically serve you, the citizens of North Dakota, and help you not only get out and exercise, but enjoy and see all the different landscapes and history that North Dakota has to offer.
Oh, that's awesome. And all of these parks do have that historical feature that is so interesting to hear about too. I know that when we've been to these hikes in the past, the park managers are always so good about telling us a little bit at the start of each hike about the history of the park and, of course, giving us a good overview and all of that. So they have been just awesome to work with. So hats off to all of them. And I know we're going to work with some really good ones again this year. So looking forward to that, Josh. So I can't wait to hear more and see some more photos of some of these hiking locations we've chosen for this year. So we'll pop in with questions if they come up along the way that might fit. Otherwise, we'll save them toward the end. So everybody remember to put your questions in the Q&A for Josh, and we'll hit those along the way. But Josh, I'll let you take it away now and start your presentation. So looking forward to this and cannot wait to see these 5 locations that we're going to. It's gonna be really fun.
Sounds good. Well, yeah, and like Doreen said, everyone, just any questions, game. So as you think of them, write them down or whatever we need to do here. So let me share my screen here.
Okay.
Hopefully everyone can see that.
Looks great, Josh.
Perfect. Great. Good check. Thanks, Doreen. So again, welcome everyone. Again, my name is Josh Steffan. I am the Education and Programs Division Chief for North Dakota Parks and Recreation. And essentially, my duty overall is to oversee the education and interpretive elements in the state park system. And so when you go to a state park and you're looking at the displays in the visitor center, or you're taking a guided hike by either one of our education personnel or a ranger or a park manager, just all those educational opportunities is kind of falls under my purview. And so, I know it's been a really long winter, as Doreen mentioned earlier, and I think we're all getting really excited to enjoy some warmer weather and some green grass. I think we really need a color change after this. But I don't think I've met anyone that's not ready for a change for sure. So the picture in the background here is obviously Cross Ranch State Park. I do believe that was one of your locations in last year's AARP Passport to Healthy Living Park. So just kind of continuing a little bit about the department before we get into some of the more specifics on hiking and the locations you're going to be visiting this upcoming summer, is just a little bit about the department. And so not to focus on all this, but really what our mission is to enrich generations through experiences that connect people to places. And I think North Dakota does this really well with our heritage, with the people that were here before it was homesteaded, and then the homesteading generation all the way up until now. And so, when I look at people that visit the state parks, from, a family that just had a newborn or toddlers that are visiting the parks, all the way to grandparents bringing their grandkids or even great grandkids and everything in between. It's really just passing along the beauty and the love of North Dakota, showcasing that beauty to that next generation, and just and instilling in that generation, just what North Dakota has to offer. For coming off of long winter, I think we can really appreciate that. But the other thing to consider is during those long winters, we're also a destination, and we offer a lot of winter recreational opportunities as well, from snowshoeing to kick sledding, cross-country skiing, and et cetera, et cetera. And so we're really trying to become more of a year-round destination, and just trying to, really encourage people to try some of those winter activities as well. But since we're focused on hiking, obviously, the top picture that you can see there, that's looking at Theodore Roosevelt National Park, which we'll talk about later. And that'll be the, North Dakota's only national park that you'll be visiting as your last stop in 2023. And so as we talk about, fulfilling that mission, North Dakota Parks and Recreation is obviously spread throughout the state. And so North Dakota State Parks, there's 13 of them spread throughout the state, and we also have 2 recreation areas. So everything from Sully Creek, which is just south of Medora in the southwest, to Lewis and Clark State Park, which is 20 miles east of Williston. Icelandic State Park is way up in the northeast corner, and then Fort Ransom is in the southeast corner, and then everything in between. And so between the 13 state parks and our couple of recreation areas, we do have a good spread throughout the state. And between your hiking series last year and this year, and I'll show a map later, but you guys have really sort of hit all the different landscapes and areas and cultural areas that North Dakota has to offer. So just a little bit more, and again, some more pictures here, but the department offers a number of year-round adventures. We obviously have a number of hiking challenges throughout the year. Our most popular one is called our 12 Months, 12 Hikes Challenge. And essentially what that does, and I'll have more information on the next slide about that in more detail, but just encourages people to get outside, be active year-round, and kind of encourage people to take at least one hike per month. And yes, that can be rather challenging in January, February, and December, as one might imagine. But that's kind of the challenge. Just get out there as the weather permits. Obviously, being safe, but just trying to enjoy all the seasons essentially. Kind of in line with that, my team, especially in the state park system, offers a number of educational programs for pre-K through adults. So we offer a number, or most of our state parks can host K through 12 field trips. We have a partnership with the North Dakota Department of Instruction to host a number of field days where multiple schools get together to try to instill environmental and science and historical education upon our students, whether that's public, private, or homeschool students, and as well as adult educational programs. And so some of you may have heard of some of our events such as Wild Outdoor Women, which takes place at Lake Metigoshe State Park in either February or September of each year, where solely a 16 plus years of age and female event just to get basically empower women to try new skills. So whether that's fly fishing or skiing or different winemaking has been a topic in the past, and everything in between, just sort of archery, empowering women to try something outdoors related that they may not undertake on their own. Of course, camping is probably our biggest attribute. So whether that's from primitive tent camping to full service modern campsites with water power and sewer in some of those cases, and so everything in between. And so that's kind of where when people think of North Dakota State Parks, that's probably the number one thing that comes to mind. Continuing, a number of our parks offer a number of rental equipment, such as pontoon boats, renting canoes, kayaks, in addition to some of the other winter rentals that we have, like snowshoes and kick sleds and things like that. Obviously, a lot of our lake parks are big on fishing, and so we have 3 parks along Lake Sakakawea. Those would be Lewis and Clark up by Williston, Fort Stevenson south of Garrison, and then Lake Sakakawea State Park near Pick City. And then, of course, Graham's Island, sort of in the middle of Devil's Lake, would be our 4 lake parks for fishing. Obviously, we're talking about hiking. I'll talk about the number of trails that we have coming up, and then all the special events that we have in the state park system. And of course, those are more park-specific events, but whether that's Skyfest or the Frontier Military Days at Fort Stevenson to some of Sodbuster Days at Fort Ransom to celebrate the heritage of the homesteaders, et cetera, et cetera. So always, check our website, which I'll have at the end of this talk, on special events that are happening in a state park that you plan to visit or a state park near you. So I told you I was going to kind of talk a little bit more about our 12 months, 12 hikes challenge. And so again, just a little bit more detail on this. It's a free challenge to register for. Again, it's just our goal is to promote outdoor physical activity year-round in the state of North Dakota. And so we have about 27 trails throughout the state, at least 1 in every state park. And then we're also partnering with 6 city park districts this year. Those would be Williston, Minot, Grand Forks, Dickinson, Bismarck, and Fargo, partnering with their park districts. And so we have one of their city parks also participating in this program this year. So try to make it a little bit more accessible, especially in those winter months, so people don't have to travel quite as far to hit up one of these trails that's participating in the program. And so if you are interested in signing up, it's not too late to join the challenge, and definitely not too late to complete it either. But I'll share again our website at the end of this talk. But you basically just sign up. I think I asked maybe 6 questions, name, email address, phone number kind of thing, to register for the program. And then when you want to participate then and actually go out and hike on your particular trail, there's just a QR code at the trailhead that you just scan on your phone. It asks for your email address and your phone number, and that's all there is to it. And that keeps track of how many times you've hiked on one of these qualifying trails. And of course, as an incentive, we do offer people that do complete the challenge are entered into a drawing for a 2024, so that'd be next year's annual permit. So you that allows you unlimited access to state parks for the entrance fee, as well as some other different prizes if for those that complete the challenge. And so we're really excited about that. Last year we had over 1,800 people register for that challenge, and had about in that 500 range actually complete the challenge. And so we had over 18,000 recorded hikes last year. And so we expect with the addition of the city parks districts trails this year that that number should only grow. So that's been really popular. And again, I think goes to show just how popular hiking really is in the state of North Dakota. Again, just I know it's not necessarily hiking based, but just to touch a little bit on our educational programming. For campers that are staying in our parks, especially over the weekend on Friday and Saturday evenings, most of our parks offer some sort of educational programming, usually geared towards children, but not necessarily. Adults also attend and get a lot out of our educational programs. So we do that. Obviously, I mentioned the field trips, and just a lot of general outreach to sort of kind of spur that curiosity in kids to get them to understand the heritage as well as the science and conservation and appreciation to conserve our state parks for all generations in the future to appreciate. Here I just wanted to show some pictures of some of our other partnerships and programs. So I mentioned some of these already, but so in the lower right-hand corner, we have a picture of some, the demonstration of some old horse-drawn farming equipment at Sodbuster Days by Fort Ransom. Upper right obviously has the guard house, which is a kind of a museum / visitor center at Fort Stevenson State Park, kind of telling the history of that infantry fort and the role it played on the north shores of the Missouri River before the dam was built and Lake Sakakawea became a thing. To the lower left-hand corner, which is our Artists in Residence program, which is a partnership with North Dakota Council on the Arts, where artists apply to spend either 7 or 10 days in a state park, drawing inspiration, and where they put on hands-on activities to demonstrate their art techniques and art that they've created during that week, inspired by the beauty of the North Dakota state parks. And so that and many others that we don't have time to talk about today is very, very beneficial to our visitors as well as our staff. Like AARP, we also have a volunteer program where we have campground hosts that volunteer up to 24 hours per week, just kind of, help with park operations. And so they help with campsite upkeep. They answer questions for our customers and guests. They help sell firewood, kind of be that person that's there just kind of answering questions. And there are some benefits to doing that. You do get a free full service campsite. So you can pull in your RV or your camper for free and just kind of help out. And so you get to enjoy the state park in your off time, as well as, kind of the mutual benefit of also engaging, meeting a lot of people from around the country that are visiting the park, visiting with them, and helping us out as well. So again, all that information is available on our website that I'll share later. So now getting into the heart of the matter, what you guys have been waiting for. And so hiking in North Dakota, when I first took this job, I was amazed at how many trails we actually have in this state. It truly is unbelievable. And this is just what would fall under North Dakota Parks and Recreation sort of purview. And so I'm not going to go through this, but you can see that, a lot of our parks, every park has hiking trails. And of our 13 state parks and true recreation areas, we have about 186 miles of hiking trails within the state. And that's just within our state park system. And so if we, take some examples here. So the first stop on your itinerary this year is Fort Ransom State Park. There's 15.5 miles of trails in that park. Fort Stevenson has just under 10 miles. Lake Menegoshi has 20. Icelandic has 4. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the THEODORE National Park, which has many more miles, which we'll see, but does not fall under our purview because that's a national park. So again, lots and lots of opportunities, lots of different scenery to see, and geological formations and environments to enjoy and encounter as you hike in these different locations. When we talk about some of these other trails, so the second bullet point here, so Theodore Roosevelt National Park, obviously, some of you may know that it's split between the North Unit and South Unit. If you combine both of them, there's 95 miles of trails between both units. And then, of course, the longest trail in the state is the Maalahay Trail, which goes from the Burning Coal Vein Campground south and west of Amadon, all the way to the North Unit of Theodore Roosevelt National Park, and that's 144 miles. And so, whether that's for hiking or biking, multi-use trails, those, that's the longest one in the state for sure. However, it's not the longest one that bisects North Dakota. North Dakota is the western terminus of what's termed the North Country National Scenic Trail. There's 436 miles of this trail in North Dakota, of 4,600 total miles. And so the western terminus of this trail currently is at Lake Sakakawea State Park, and it goes all the way east to Crown Point, New York. And so there's a number of groups that assist with that trail across the country. And sometimes I like to highlight them because not a lot of people know that that kind of sort of bisects North Dakota, at least the sort of from central North Dakota to the east. And so those of you that are lucky enough to get down to Fort Ransom State Park in May, part of the North Country Trail goes through Fort Ransom State Park in the southeastern corner of North Dakota. And of course, I would be remiss if I don't at least point out that there's also trails in a number of different wildlife management areas, as well as city and county parks. And again, so numerous that I can't share every city. Here's the 6 largest cities in North Dakota listed, but obviously Valley City and Jamestown and Wahpeton and Devil's Lake. And I mean, almost every city has city park district, or as a park district, and some sort of a trail associated with it. So regardless if it falls under a trail in a state park, or if it's in a recreation area or the national park, but every trail is going to vary in length and difficulty. And at the beginning of this presentation, Doreen, made it a point to make sure when you're starting a new exercise program or trying something new, always consult your doctor, and don't essentially know your limits. That's really what it boils down to, at least in my mind. And so some of these trails, they're very flat, so it's kind of a nice, gentle, leisurely stroll. And the next trail, even potentially in the same park, can be a more strenuous challenge. And so it's important to do your homework ahead of time. Look at the websites of the particular park. Kind of look at trail maps, and if you can't find what you're looking for, obviously don't hesitate to reach out directly to the state park, the national park, and find out that information before you arrive at your destination. And of course, in state parks, there's always a ranger or a park ranger on duty. And so even if the visitor center may be closed, there's always a contact number for someone on call that can answer questions. And that's really important when it comes to trail conditions as well. And so, right now, so I'm in Bismarck right now. And so even though it's overcast, the closest state park would be Fort Lincoln. And in the last 2 weeks, it's surprising how fast the snow has really melted. And so their trails would be more muddy, less snow covered. But I was talking to some of my colleagues up at Lake Metagoshi State Park in the Turtle Mountains, and they still have several feet of snow on their trails. And so it's just important to kind of know ahead of time that, I want to go for a hike at Lake Metagoshi. It's not quite the same as it may be in a different part of North Dakota. And I think sometimes we forget that when we're kind of after a long winter and we're like, oh, everything should be, green and ready to go. So just keep that in mind as you head out. Other little tips and tricks, if you will, just kind of remember, hiking is not a race, right? I mean, you're not signing up for a marathon. And so it's kind of go at your own pace, as slow or as fast as you want. But really, and I enjoy hiking too. And sometimes I'm guilty of this as well, but it seems like I'll start a hike and sometimes I'll finish it and be like, man, I really forgot to look around. I was more focused on my footing, right? So I don't slip and fall. And so I think it's really important just to, take your time, obviously watch your footing, but also stop and make, as the old adage says, kind of stop and smell the roses, right? So kind of take in that beauty, stop and, maybe you're going to bring a pair of binoculars and look at some of the birds in the trees, or just stop along the trail in the shade and just listen and, listen to the birds and listen to the wind rippling through the leaves, et cetera. And so don't forget that as well. Don't overexert yourself, know your limits. Obviously you want appropriate and comfortable shoes that offer ankle support. Brand new shoes are probably the worst possible thing you can do. When in terms of just starting out hiking, you want to break them in a little bit, kind of get them to form around your feet a little bit. And so that's always really important too. Depending on the season, you have to kind of think about how much water to take along, right? So if you're going on, whether it's a half-mile hike, obviously you probably need a little less water than if you're going on a 4 or 8 mile hike. But kind of the rule of thumb is a half a liter of water per hour minimum, and a much more if it's extremely hot outside. And so kind of the other thing to consider too is a lot of the wildlife is either out, earlier in the morning or late in the evening too. And so you can kind of time your hike based upon what your goal of that hike is, whether it's wildlife viewing or whether, you're staying in the state park camping and you're just going out and enjoying the trail for a few hours. Just make sure you always take plenty of water along. And of course the basics, sunscreen, sunglasses, bug repellent, those sorts of things, just so that you're more comfortable on the trail. Lip balm's important, sort of those things, again, not only from a health perspective to, avoid exposure to sun and the skin cancer risks associated with that, but also just, wearing a hat and bug spray just keeps you more comfortable along your hike. And then of course, don't forget, any snacks or medications. And I know AARP has been really good with you folks in terms of, providing water and snacks and those sorts of things when you're going on your excursions together, but then when you're venturing out, independently, don't forget those sort of similar things. And then of course, some people like kind of a hiking or walking stick to brace themselves as they hike along the trails as well. And then lastly, before we sort of get into some more of the specific locations that you guys will be going to, just, kind of be weather aware. We know that we can get sometimes nasty pop-up thunderstorms in the afternoon in July and August, sometimes during those hot, humid summer days that we get, which we're probably yearning for right now after this long winter. But just kind of, be aware of your surroundings in terms of weather and let others know your plans when you're going hiking. So in the upcoming months, I would say the upcoming 5 months, sort of you guys have picked 5 locations for your AARP hiking day trips. And so obviously this is the kind of the kickoff day, if you will, for kind of the preview. And then you can see the dates there. And I'm sure Doreen will kind of mention where you guys can sign up for these particular hikes once I'm done talking here. But your first one's upcoming at the end of May, just after Memorial Day weekend. And then one every month thereabouts. And so, you're going to start out at Fort Ransom on May 31st, down in the southeastern corner of the state. And then in June, you're going to go just north of Bismarck, about an hour, to the north shore of Lake Sakakawea, to Fort Stevenson State Park. Then in July, you're going to be way up in the northeast at Icelandic State Park, which is 6 miles west of Cavalier, North Dakota. And then you'll be up in the Turtle Mountains in north central North Dakota, about 1-2 miles from the Canadian border, up at Lake Metagoshi State Park. And then you'll finish your hiking passport, if you will, near the city of Medora at the south unit of Theodore Roosevelt National Park. And so you guys will really get to see a broad spectrum of the state. You guys are really traveling throughout the state this summer, and that's really excited to see that. And so over the next few next 5 slides, I'll just kind of touch on sort of what you guys can expect in each park and kind of what makes each of these 5 parks unique. And so since your first stop is Fort Ransom, we'll start there. And so Fort Ransom is located in the Lisbon area of North Dakota. And is basically, it's named after an 1860s military fort. And depending upon which road you take into Fort Ransom, the city itself, and then Fort Ransom State Park, which is adjacent to the city, you'll probably drive by the old ruins of Fort Ransom itself. It's actually not in the state park, but the State Historical Society oversees that kind of along with us in terms of a maintenance agreement with them. And so you'll see some of the old ruins and cornerstones of that particular fort. But perhaps what's striking about Fort Ransom is the contrast from the surrounding flat landscape of eastern North Dakota to when you hit the Cheyenne River Valley of Fort Ransom itself. And so so the Cheyenne River runs right through Fort Ransom State Park. It's heavily wooded with deciduous trees. It's just so contrasting compared to all the surrounding landscape. It's sort of like an oasis in terms of the flat land that's all around the particular river valley. And so in Fort Ransom, there's opportunities for canoeing, fishing, bird watching. It is one of our parks that allows equestrian activity. So there's horseback riding, if you bring your own horses, and then of course hiking. And so Fort Ransom has 16 hiking trails that varies from anything kind of open prairie trails to trails that are more heavily into the more wooded areas of the particular park. And a lot of the trails, there's some closer to the river, there's some farther from the river that kind of goes from the bottom of the river valley up to the top of the river valley, so to speak, and kind of overlooks the whole valley then too. So a number of good overlooks. And it would be one of our few state parks that actually has some what we term tall grass prairie ecosystem in it. And so the tall grass prairie is an ecosystem region from basically southeast North Dakota, south Minnesota, and runs all the way down to about Oklahoma and northern Texas. And so there are some really unique plant species that you find at Fort Ransom that you don't find in other areas of North Dakota. Also unique to Fort Ransom is it's our only state park that offers an overnight stay in a covered wagon, as you can see down there on the lower left. So there's a couple of covered wagons that are available for lodging. The park also has yurts, you can see in the bottom right. A historic farmhouse that's available to rent, as well as your normal campsites for either tent or camper/RV camping. Also located in the park is a historic farmstead called the SUNY Farm. And so if you go there, you take a tour, there's old barns, they have a whole bunch of old, turn of the century machinery that was horse drawn, or the early implements that were either steam tractor or the early gas powered tractor driven implements. And so it kind of has that available there as well. And so kind of an eclectic park, drawing on some of the military history of the area, the natural beauty, as well as sort of the homesteading area with that historic farmstead located within the park. Your second stop in June is going to be Fort Stephenson State Park. So Fort Stephenson is located 3 miles south of Garrison, right on the north shore of Lake Sakakawea. So Fort Stephenson is named after late 1800s fort that was mostly a supply depot for a lot of other military posts in the Dakota Territory. Features of this particular park, we have a replica guardhouse, and so basically the fort's jailhouse, if you will, that now serves as sort of a gift store, and so half of it's sort of a gift store educational component, and the other half is sort of a museum visitor center type experience. Fort Stevenson's a host. Well, obviously it's on the lake, right? So lots of fishing. We have 2 marinas with boat ramps. Obviously there's slips for boats that remain in the water during the summer months. Currently, Fort Stevenson is the only state park that has pontoon rentals for the big lake, and is a host of many, many special events throughout the summer. So in April, we just finished, they have a maple sugaring festival. So the state park staff actually tap and collect sap from their box elder maple trees and boil that down into maple syrup. And so there's a kind of a whole festival around that, which was just a couple weeks ago. And then they have special events all summer. So coming up in June, they have Frontier Military Days. They have a kite festival called Sky Fest over Memorial Day weekend, et cetera, et cetera. And so a very busy park in terms of special events. As for hiking, they do have 8 hiking trails, and those go from anything from beautiful views of Lake Sakakawea and lake vistas to native prairie and some ponderosa pine woodland trails as well. For your third stop, you can go to the northeast corner, Icelandic State Park in July. And Icelandic State Park is another park that has a number of really interesting features to point out. And so when you first enter Icelandic State Park, you'll go by the visitor center. And the visitor center is one of our, I would say one of our largest visitor centers. It hosts a museum focused on pioneer history. And so especially with the Scandinavian and Icelandic heritage up in that particular area of the state. So it's called the Pioneer Heritage Center Museum, and that's right when you kind of enter the park. And one of the interesting things I find there, amongst everything is interesting, but one of the coolest things is they have one of the largest collection of Icelandic books in the state of North Dakota, if not the upper Midwest. And so those all be in the Icelandic language, of course, but it's kind of interesting to see some of those books. Icelandic State Park has a lake in the park. It's called Lake Renwick, formed by the Renwick Dam. And obviously there's camping and the usual state park kind of things. 6 hiking trails. Some of those trails do enter into a 200-acre nature preserve called the Gunnlaugsson Nature Preserve, which we also manage as an agency. And so you really can't tell where one starts and one enters. So that's, again, just land set aside for protection, but you have access to it while you're there. Another really cool feature is that there are a number of restored historical buildings that were moved from other small towns in the area to the state park. And so you can see that church on the right-hand side of your screen there. That's called Halson Church. It used to be located in the city of Halson. It was moved and restored on site, kind of creating a pioneer village, if you will. And if you get a chance to go to Icelandic, go inside the church. Just last summer, we had a partnership with the North Dakota Council on the Arts and a number of granting agencies, such as Partners for Sacred Places and a number of national groups that were able to basically hire artists to commission pieces of Scandinavian art within that church. And they're really fantastic. And so I don't want to spoil it too much on what those pieces are. I'll leave that for you guys to find out for yourselves. And the other thing, since you're up in that neck of the woods, Frostfire Park, which is about 30 miles from Icelandic State Park near the city of Walhalla, actually closer to one of our state recreation areas, the Pembina Gorge State Recreation Area, hosts a number of theater productions throughout the year. And so when you're up in that area, it may be fruitful to look at their website to see if you can hit one of those theater productions as well, since you're in that neck of the woods. Your fourth stop for the year will be Lake Metagoshi State Park, which is up in the north central, right up adjacent to the Canadian border, up in the Turtle Mountains. And so up in the Turtle Mountains, there's a number of scattered lakes, of which Lake Metagoshi State Park has a number of different lakes. The main one, obviously, Lake Metagoshi being inside the state park, or at least on one side of the lake. Again, lodging opportunities, camping, cabins, yurts, also dormitories for larger groups. We use those heavily for school groups and scout groups, or sometimes, whatever larger group wants to use those facilities as well. We have an outdoor learning center at Lake Metagoshi where we offer a lot of those learning opportunities that I talked about earlier. And then, of course, a number of opportunities for canoeing, fishing, kayaking, bird watching, and hiking. 11 trails, obviously, a whole different landscape, being a little bit higher elevation. You see some different types of trees up in that area of North Dakota. And the one trail I'll highlight for you guys is called the Old Oak Trail, which the trailhead is kind of right dab smack in the middle of the park. You really can't miss it. But was North Dakota's first nationally recognized national recreation trail. And that'll be turning, that distinction will be turning 50 years old here in a couple of years. And so hopefully we're looking to celebrate that a little bit. But it's a very neat trail to hike on, as are all the other ones. One tidbit about being a little bit higher elevation is that Lake Metagoshi, and you'll be visiting there in August, hopefully it should be a little bit cooler than the rest of the state. That's usually the case. So not cold, but if, say Minot is 90, Lake Metagoshi might only be in the 80s. So it's just a little bit more refreshing sometimes up in that area, especially for hiking during the summer. Not that it can't get hot, but it's usually relatively cooler. And then last but not least, your last stop will take you, to the city of Medora area, to Theodore Roosevelt National Park. And of course, this is North Dakota's only national park. And it's actually the only national park to be named after a person. And so it's rather unique in that way. I already mentioned that there's 2 separate units and, almost 100 miles of trails in the park system itself, with the Mata Hake Trail close by. And again, although, this doesn't fall under the purview of North Dakota Parks and Recreation because this is the National Park Service. Of course, there's a number of campgrounds. I'm sure most of you have driven the scenic loop road through the park to view the wild horses and the elk and the bighorn sheep and the bison. But again, with the Little Missouri River running through it, it's just this very scenic, picturesque, undammed, sort of untamed river that we still have in North Dakota. And so, amazing wind and water erosion that formed the formations that you see in the bottom left and all throughout the park. And so we've all seen pictures of the North Dakota Badlands. And so I'm really excited that you guys get the opportunity to go there and maybe hikes on some of those trails into some of the overlooks, whether that's overlooking some of the Badlands or the Little Missouri River itself. Will be, very beneficial for you guys to see that landscape, because again, totally different than all the other locations that you have upcoming this particular year. And so with that, this is the main park website for North Dakota Parks and Recreation. You can find maps of the hiking trails and the campgrounds and everything within this site. Just when you go to this main site, you kind of hover over a big tab on the top that says destinations, and then click on the park that you're interested in, and then you'll find all the information in there. And if you don't, you can always contact me directly. That's my information there, and I can keep it on this slide for a while. Or if you just have general questions and maybe don't even know which park to inquire about, you can always call our general information sort of help desk at that 328. I just realized I don't have the full number. I will fix that and totally missed that. I will get that to you before I hang up here. And but our email is there as well.
Very good. Josh, just leave that up for a little bit and then you can find that number. But
yeah, I will. Yes.
Oh, wow. And then
I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah, awesome. Well, great. I'm looking at all these great photos from our hikes, and people can kind of get a sense of what it looks like when we're out there in the parks. We usually get a nice big shelter where we can have our table and have our snacks and water. And we've always got, just a really nice opportunity for people to congregate and visit before and after the hike too. So it's really kind of a fun day. So absolutely. Great. Oh my gosh, that was really, really interesting. And I am so excited about going to some of these parks. First one I have to ask you about, Josh. Then we'll get to some questions. Remember to put your questions in the Q&A, please, and we'll get to them. We've got a really good question in there that I want to hear about too very soon. But first one I want to talk about a little bit is about Icelandic. It looks like, because you showed a photo with the bridge over a real pretty gorge. And so is it a real hilly area? Is there a lot of elevation changes in Icelandic, and should people be prepared for that? Is it a little more, is one of these parks more extreme than the other, or how, would you say?
Sure. So I mean, it all depends on the trail, right? So I mean, you can find, something that's more gentle to more strenuous in most of our locations. I wouldn't say Icelandic is any more strenuous than others. I would say that Fort Ransom has some fairly good elevation changes on particular trails from the river bottom to the top of the river valley. And then of course, Theodore Roosevelt would have some rather steep, they're not necessarily long trails, but some of those trails can get rather steep. But no, North Dakota being relatively flat for the most part. Icelandic, there's just over some wetland bridges there. So it's not that hilly per se.
Okay. Oh, it looks gorgeous though. And like you talked about earlier, everybody can hike at their own pace. All these trails, the park managers are there in the beginning to talk about the different trails and, how extreme they might be, give guidance on length and what you might encounter on that trail. So know that you'll be coming into it with some good information too, before you head out on the trails in each of these day hikes. So great.
And there's nothing wrong, you feeling tuckered out. There's nothing wrong with, not completing the full trail and just turning around too. So.
Right. That's right. Yeah. Just go at your own pace and have fun and enjoy nature and remember to do that. That's great. So one of our questions is on bicycling. Actually, it kind of relates to some of our trail talk that we're doing here. John is asking about bicycling, but doesn't want to do hardcore mountain biking. I'm with him. I like biking on paved bike trails or easy non-paved trails. Same here. Can you recommend good places in North Dakota state parks where there are good bike trails like that? Thanks,
Sure,
John.
absolutely.
Great question.
Thanks, John, for the question. So if you wanted to stay on paved trails, so your best bet is, so one, we don't have a lot of actual paved hiking or biking trails within our parks. So I would offer, I guess, two things with that. So one, most of our campground roads are paved. And so you could always, just ride around the paved areas of the park. And obviously that's picturesque in its own right. You could inquire about so if you wanted to stay on something that's fairly a packed non-paved trail, we have some of those available as well. Fort Lincoln State Park south of Mandan has a paved trail. And then the other place to look would be, so I would say up in near Icelandic State Park. So there is a paved trail called I think it's called the Cavalier Trail, but it's 6 miles from the city of Cavalier to the state park. And that's all paved, running parallel to the highway. And so that'd be a nice, easy, extremely flat bike path that you could, so from the park to Cavalier would be 6 miles and back.
Cool.
6 miles one way, I should say.
Yeah. Well, nice. Yeah. If you have any say on doing more kinds of bike trail things around North Dakota, I would love to see more of that too. So John, thank you for that. And he says thank you as well. So
you bet.
Awesome. Very good. So the other thing I would encourage people, and now you've got that number in there. Do you want to say that number now, Josh?
Absolutely. Yep. So I apologize for that, everyone. So our general information number is 701-328-5357.
Okay.
And that's on our website too. So,
357. Yep. Perfect. Yep. Okay. I just wanted to give you a chance to do that so that if you want to take your slides off, you can. That'd be fine. But I wanted to encourage people too that if they are coming out to these hikes, and some of them are a little ways away from maybe where people live, to maybe rent a cabin or a yurt. I know we had some people do that last year at some of our hikes, and that was kind of cool. They had fun and they kind of were able to hike all day. So.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of the cool thing is, we pending availability, there is those lodging opportunities, and they can go anything from a relatively primitive cabin in some parks to something that's more full service with, water and bathrooms and, everything in between, kind of the modern amenities of home.
They're very nice. The yurts down at Fort Ransom, I know we peeked in and they are gorgeous. So, and I know
It's a
people
unique
stay there, Josh,
thing. Yeah. Yep. It's a unique thing for sure.
yeah, very cool, very cool. The other thing I wanted to talk about too is that your park managers, this year we've worked with them to offer a guided hike for people that want to go with a guide. Last year we kind of just like, here's the trails, here, go have fun. And some people grouped up and went, but this year you have the option of going on your own if you want to with your small group or on your own, whatever you want to do, or you can go with a guided hike, you know, so some people will be at the head of the pack, some of the park folks, and be able to show you around a little bit. And that'll range anywhere from 1.5 to 3 miles probably for those guided hikes. And then people can always go up on their own a little further too if they wish. So that's
absolutely
kind of a feature.
Yep. Yep, absolutely. Thanks for mentioning that. I had that written down and I was going to mention that, but yeah, so this year, at least in the state parks where I know Doreen's kind of working, we're kind of working on the national parks kind of together, but we do have either the rangers or some of the educational interpretive staff lined up to kind of tell you guys some stories and kind of show you where to go. And, you know, kind of, we call it a guided tour, sort of, you know, showing you, highlighting some of the plants and history of the sites.
Right, right. And then just to remind everybody, we always provide some water and snacks, you know, maybe some fruit or something like that for people to have a snack, but you're always welcome to bring your own extra water, especially on those hot days. Make sure you have plenty, like Josh mentioned. So that was really good. And all of our hikes are going to start at 11 a.m. The one in THEODORE Roosevelt National Park will actually start at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. So it's still 11 a.m. Central Time. So all of them are at 11 a.m. Central Time. And they're all on Wednesdays. And so we're kind of going to have the parks to ourselves when we're there, which is really kind of cool because on the weekends it's just so busy. And this is really fun. And the park rangers and managers have given us such great attention, and it's just really been fun.
Well, we're always happy to have you guys or whoever comes to the parks. And yeah, this is, you know, we're just looking forward to meeting everyone this summer, and, you know, hope you guys have a great time and maybe hit all 5.
I know. Yeah, let's do all 5. So I don't see any other questions in there right now, Josh, but do you have any last comments, anything you want to share before we wrap it up here?
No, just thanks for having me, everyone. Again, if you any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to and again, park directly, me, the general helpline, or, you know, or questions to Doreen, and she can pass them on too, I'm sure. So
that's right. Thanks so much, Josh. Really, really appreciate all the good information, and your photos are gorgeous, and it just entices us to want to come out and go hiking with all of our friends around North Dakota. So thank you very much and for being here. So, and
my pleasure.
Also, yeah, great. I also want to thank again Bob Entringer and also my colleagues Marnie Peel, Wendy Hogue, Janelle Mose, and Josh Aspig for all their help and assistance in the background and their support. This is brought to you by a number of people, so it's really fun to do. So Wendy's got some slides on here telling you about some of our how you can register for our events. And we've got another slide here that's going to have all the hikes on it. So you can register for those in advance there's one site, you can pick out all the hikes that you want to register for and get registered for them all. So that is coming, there's the hiking day trips, and that's all of them. And you can go to that link on the bottom. We'll get back to that. It'll come back up again. And it's also, that link was in your email beforehand. We'll get it afterward. Here's the I want to volunteer link that we talked about. And so anyway, we'll make sure you get those in the follow-up email as well, so that you can, the other link that we provided there's that one for registering for the hikes. And then also for the Parks and Rec website, so you can go and look. They have got really good, a whole section on hiking and really good information, and you can look at the trail maps ahead of time on their site and kind of get yourself acclimated to maybe what you want to do and what you want to see while you're at the park, at the individual parks. So wonderful. For those of you attending this live event, watch for an email. We're going to ask you for a little feedback and tell us what you thought about it. We really appreciate you joining us for this Hiking North Dakota preview today, part of the Passport to Healthy Living program for 2023. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll look forward to having you volunteer